So this is about Christ feeding the multitude. When I was translating Mark out of Greek, I was reading through it, obviously, as you do, and I noticed that there was a mystery pertaining to the feeding of the two multitudes, the 5,000 and the 4,000, because if you read it, it says in 19, when I broke the 5 loaves amongst the 5,000, how many baskets of fragments did you take up? And they said 12. And when I broke 7 loaves among 4,000, how many baskets of fragments did you take up? And they said 7. And so Christ ends it with the question, how is it that you don't understand? So, as I said before, with the miracle of walking on water, there's a parable in that. It's like, it's not particularly a verbal parable, it's kind of like an action parable. So, Matthew and Mark both have kind of vague descriptions of this miracle. I think there's a bit more information in the Gospel of John, if we go there. And if I go to chapter 6, you'll know that this is where Jesus describes himself as the bread of heaven. So we kind of got a bit more to go on. So that's later in the chapter. But as we start off, it says it's Passover. So immediately we have kind of like an indication of, the unleavened bread and the link between the communion, which is necessary to have that as a basis to progress through the chapter with. So the multitude comes to him, and if we go into chapter 9 here, we've then got the 5 barley loaves, okay, up here. So the word barley is very important there, because that, to me, immediately reminds me of the first fruits of the Pentecost, which in an antitype stands for the Holy Ghost, because we've got, as we said at the beginning in verse 4, we've got it's on the Passover, and then he's going to feed them with the barley. So him being the Passover lamb, as an antitype of the Passover lamb, he's going to feed them with the Holy Ghost. Okay, he's going to feed them with the Spirit. He's going to fill them. So that's the next word we're looking for, being filled, which is in verse 12 here. Okay. So I'm getting a little bit excited, jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm trying to. If you've read the Gospel, you'll know the story about they eat. Right, so verse 12 here is really crucial, because it links with verse 39 I've written now, as you can see. When they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing is lost. So let me skip into the verse 39. So basically, later on in the chapter, as we see here, it says Christ declares himself to be the bread of life. Okay? And he says, they ate manna in the wilderness and they're dead. And it says, for the bread of God is he which comes down from heaven and gives life unto the world. Okay, so we can see that the bread, as we were saying, is the communion. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you won't have life, as he says. So here, verse 51, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eats this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give him is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Right. So as I was saying, once we know this, the parable of the feeding the multitude starts to become clearer. Okay, it's Passover, they have the barley loaves, the Pentecost, etc. And this is the Father's will, that all of which he has given me I should lose nothing, but I should raise him up again at the last day. So if we keep hold of those words there, where he says, the Father's will is that all that he's given me, I should lose nothing, but raise it up at the last day. Raise it up at the last day. So go back into verse 12. When they were filled, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing is lost. So we got the same language there explaining what's going on. Okay? Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing's lost. It's talking about the resurrection of the dead, I believe. Because it says, I should lose nothing. He's not losing the fragments of that bread in that sort of physical, the visible kind of representation of this parable. He's not losing any fragments of bread that's taken up in the baskets, but they're going to be raised up the resurrection. So we're seeing some things happening. We're seeing a resurrection. We're seeing the men who eat being filled. So as it was saying here about this to be filled, if I read something from outside the Bible, so it's like he says here, be filled with Spirit. Be filled with Spirit. So again, it says, I tell you the truth, no one will enter heaven's kingdom because I ordered it, but rather because you yourselves are filled. So look at this detail. So at the beginning of chapter 6, just before he feeds the multitude, he goes to the place where he's going to fill them. And he says Jesus went up into a mountain. There he sat with his disciples. You go into Isaiah 25:6. Isaiah 25:6. And in this mountain shall the Lord of hosts make unto all people a feast of fat things, a feast of wines on the lees, a feast of fat things full of marrow, of wines on the lees well refined. And he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations.